Moonlight turned the judgment stones white as old bones, and Cordelia stood barefoot on them with her ankles swelling over the carved runes, her belly heavy and tight beneath a dress that no longer laced closed. 8 months along, the midwife had said. A moon and a half from birth, if stress did not steal more from her first. The air smelled of wolf musk, tallow smoke, and wet iron. Every pack member she had ever fed, trained beside, laughed with, or bled for ring the court in a half circle, faces lifted as if they were here for a festival instead of a sentencing. Elder Brannock held up 3 letters with her seal pressed in red wax. Patrol routes for silver, he announced, voice carrying. Our Eastern Ridge sold to rogues, signed by Cordelia Valewood. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Spy, whore, traitor. I did not write those. Her voice came out rough. Look at the hand. Look at the spacing. I never. Silence. The word cracked like a whip from Alpha Rowan's mouth. He did not look at her face, only at her swollen middle, as if the child there had personally offended him. You were seen meeting outsiders. I was collecting winter yarrow by the border, with 2 sentries who can testify. Dead, someone called from the back. Both dead in the same raid you sold. The crowd hissed agreement. Cordelia searched for one familiar ally and found none. Her mother kept her gaze fixed on the stones. Her younger brother stood with his jaw clenched and his hands at his sides, not moving, not speaking. Even that hurt more than the cold. Brannock stepped down from the dais with a branding iron glowing cherry red in the brazier. By moon law, seduction used for treason is doubled guilt. Seductress and spy. Exile mark. The word seductress drew laughter from men who had once begged her to dance at solstice fires. One of Rowan's lieutenants, Kellen, leaned close enough that she could smell ale on his breath. Should have picked a richer buyer, Leah. Would have bought you better mercy. She jerked back, but 2 guards caught her arms. Panic made the baby twist hard, a hot pressure low in her back that stole breath. Please, she said, hate and terror blurring into one sharp plea. You can kill me if you must, but let the healer check the child first. Please. Alpha Rowan's mouth flattened. That child may not be of this pack. You forfeited claims when you opened your legs for enemies. Something inside her cracked at that. Grief? Yes, but also a brittle, clean edge of fury. You know that is a lie. He nodded to Brannock. The iron kissed her collarbone and the world became white pain and the smell of her own skin burning. She screamed once, then bit it back because she would not give them more. When it was done, the mark of exile throbbed above her heart. A broken crescent scored through with a slash. Brannock dropped the iron into snow and watched it hiss. Cordelia Valewood, he intoned, you are no daughter of this den. You will cross the border before moonset. If found within packlands by dawn, you die. If any shelter you, they share your sentence. A woman near the front, Aunt Morell, who had held Cordelia when she was 5 and feverish, spat at her feet. Take your bastard and rot. They stripped her cloak, her knife, her coin purse. One guard reached for the copper charm at her throat, the tiny moonwell token her grandmother had given her. Cordelia slapped his hand away on instinct. He backhanded her hard enough that sparks burst behind her eyes. The crowd did not protest. When they dragged her to the border gate, snow had begun again, fine and slanting. The gate captain shoved her over the line with both palms between her shoulders. She stumbled to her knees in drifted ice, hands flying to her belly before she even thought to break her own fall. Behind her, the portcullis boomed shut. For a long time she knelt there, forehead nearly touching frozen ground, breath sawing in and out while the branded flesh pulsed with each heartbeat. Cry now, she told herself. Cry and get it out. But no tears came, only shivering. Then from behind the bars, low enough no one else might hear, her brother's voice. Don't go North Road. They sent trackers that way. She froze, turned. His face was mostly shadow between the iron slats. Why are you telling me this now? His throat worked. I couldn't stop it. A beat. Go through the pines, past the old watch cairn, don't light a fire. She wanted to hate him. Maybe she did. But she nodded once, and he was gone before she could ask if he believed her. She walked into the trees with blood drying on her lip and the taste of burnt metal at the back of her tongue. By first dawn, she could no longer feel 2 toes on her left foot. By second dusk, she had stopped checking whether the sky was snowing because the cold had become the whole world. She moved by instinct and fragments of childhood memory. This split rock, that fallen pine, the creek that should have been running but lay silent under ice. Hunger clawed so hard she chewed fir needles until her gums bled. Thirst came easier. She packed snow into her cheeks until it numbed the ache in her head. Twice she heard wolves in the distance and dropped behind deadfall. One hand over her mouth, the other spread over her belly while the child shifted restlessly under skin stretched tight as drumhide. At midnight on the second night, pain cinched around her middle in a sudden band. She bent double against a trunk, gasping. Not yet. Please. Not here. The wave passed, leaving her shaky and damp with sweat that immediately turned cold. She could not go back. If Valewood found her inside their line, they would kill her and call it law. If rogues found her outside any line, they would sell her to whichever lord wanted leverage. Every path ended with someone deciding what her body was worth. Unless she reached Frosthold. The name rose like a half-remembered prayer. Sebastian Frostborn's territory lay beyond the border pines, old fortress broken in last year's slaughter, a pack still rebuilding with too few hunters and too many graves. He was no friend of Valewood. He was also no fool. A branded exile on his doorstep could ignite 3 provinces. He would probably turn her away. Probably was not certainty. And certainty, tonight, meant death. Toward dawn, she saw lanterns moving in a line far behind her, too steady for wanderers, trackers. One called, voice carrying through trees. Cordelia, come back now and we'll make this clean. Another answered with a laugh. Careful with the belly. Alpha said the pup might still buy us favor. Ice flooded her limbs hotter than fear. They weren't hunting to kill quickly. They were hunting to claim. That was the breaking point. Not the brand, not the spit, not the gate slamming. This. Hearing her child priced in the dark like a pelt. She ran. Snow sucked at her boots until one tore at the seam. She left it when it snagged and kept going on numb toes. Branches whipped her face, stinging cuts into already chapped skin. Her breath burned, each inhale scraping. Behind her came shouts. Then the bay of hounds released from leashes. She veered off the game trail and forced herself through a thorn thicket where wolves would hesitate to charge blind. Twigs ripped her sleeves, scored her forearms, opened old blisters on her palms. Pain meant she was still moving. When another contraction hit, sharper than before, she crashed to one knee in powder and nearly blacked out. Not now, she whispered to the child, teeth chattering. Little Moon, not now. Stay with me. She pressed both hands under the curve of her belly and breathed the way the midwife had taught in gentler rooms than this. In for 4, out for 6. Again, again. The wave crested and ebbed. She rose shaking. The thicket spat her into a shallow ravine. At the bottom, half buried in drifts, lay old boundary stones carved with Frostborn's wolf and crown sigil worn thin by weather. She almost laughed, a ragged, unbelieving sound. Territory. A horn call split the morning from somewhere ahead, deep and resonant. Frosthold's patrol signal, not far. Help! She tried to shout, but it came out as a cracked rasp. She staggered up the far side of the ravine, fingers digging into crusted snow, and crested into a clearing where blackened ruins rose between new scaffolds, broken towers under repair, walls patched with fresh timber, banners of dark blue snapping in the wind. Frosthold. 2 sentries on the outer wall spotted her at once. Bows came up, arrows knocked. "Halt!" one barked. "State pack and purpose." Cordelia lifted empty hands, then had to drop one back to her belly as another hard tightening gripped her. "No weapon," she managed. I seek sanctuary, please." "Name." "Cordelia?" "Valewood." The surname tasted like ash. "Exiled." The 2nd sentry swore. "She's marked." Movement flared along the wall. More guards. More bows. A gate on the lower side groaned, opened a crack, and 3 warriors came out in layered leather, blades visible. Their leader, broad-shouldered with a scar over one brow, stopped 2 strides away and looked her over once. Brand, torn dress, bare foot, blood crusted on her shin. "Turn around," he said, slowly. She obeyed. He checked for hidden weapons and found none because she had none left to hide. When she faced him again, dizziness swayed the ground. The ruined keep behind him doubled, blurred. "Valewood exile at our wall is not random," he said to his men. "Could be bait. Could be dying," one muttered. "Could be both," Cordelia thought, but the words stayed in her throat. Then a new scent cut through snow and smoke, cedar, cold iron, and something wild like crushed heather after frost. The guards straightened without being told. Boots crunched over packed snow behind them. Sebastian Frostborn stepped through the half-open gate in a dark coat dusted white at the shoulders. No crown, no ceremonial armor, just a sword at his back and a command that lived in his bones. He looked younger than rumor and harder than it too. Golden eyes taking in details as if nothing escaped him. The brand, her split lip, the way she braced around her abdomen between contractions. His jaw tightened. "Who chased you?" She opened her mouth, but black spots crowded her vision. Somewhere beyond the wall, hooves thundered on frozen ground, fast, many, official pace, a messenger's arrival. "Trackers," she whispered. "From Valewood." Sebastian's gaze flicked to the tree line, then back to her. Decision moved through him like a blade drawn. "Inside," he ordered. One guard hesitated. "My Alpha, she's branded. If we shelter, I know what she is marked as." His voice went flat with warning. "I also know what I see." Cordelia's knees gave out before anyone could reach her. She folded around the child by reflex, both hands cradling her belly even as she hit the snow. The last thing she heard before darkness surged up was Sebastian, very close, saying, "Get the healer, and post double guard at the war room doors." Now. Hands moved, boots hammered stone. Someone slid an arm beneath Cordelia's shoulders, another under her knees. But the scent that wrapped around her before she was lifted was cedar and frost heather. And she knew without opening her eyes who had ignored every law in the province to carry her over his threshold. Sebastian. She floated in and out of sound as he took her weight from his guard and strode through corridors that smelled of mortar dust, smoke, and old blood scrubbed clean. Frosthold was still half ruins from what had happened here last year. She remembered the stories, the massacre, the pyres. Somewhere nearby, men shouted for hot water and clean linens. Somewhere farther away, a horn answered another horn. The messenger who had arrived on frozen hooves was being received. War had walked right up to his gate, and he had chosen to bring her in anyway. She tried to speak, to warn him that Valewood would call this provocation, that they would demand she be handed over by dawn, but her tongue felt thick and heavy. Her head lolled against his coat. She heard his heartbeat under wool and leather, too fast for calm. "Stay with me," he said, low and near her ear, as if there were no one else in the hall. "You're safe for this moment. Breathe." Safe. The word was so strange it almost hurt. Then warmth hit her face. Firelight. A door thudded open, then shut behind them with iron certainty. She was lowered to something hard padded with folded blankets, one of the long tables in a war room, if the map pins and ink and parchment scent were any indication. Practical, defensible, central. Someone else stepped in, brisk and female. Out! She snapped at the guards. If she bolts, an alpha can chase her. You two can't catch labor. A muttered protest. Retreating footsteps. The click of a latch. Cordelia forced her eyes open to slits. Gray-streaked hair in a thick braid. Healer's satchel. Steady hands. The woman pressed fingers to Cordelia's pulse, lifted her wrist, then glanced at Sebastian. Stress contractions. Dehydration. Fever climbing. Child's heartbeat is there, but she needs broth, water, and sleep before she needs questions. Agreed. Sebastian's answer came immediately. Agreed. Cordelia rasped at the same time, then winced because speaking scraped her throat raw. The healer, Marta, someone called her from the hall, snorted once. Good. We all agree she's stubborn. Lift her chin. Sebastian moved closer. Cordelia flinched before she could stop herself. He froze. It was such a small thing, but it split through her haze more cleanly than any command. Men like Rowan did not stop when women flinched. They called it disobedience and continued. Sebastian held still, hand hovering inches from her jaw, and said, May I? May I? Her laugh came out brittle. You're an alpha. You can do what you want. His gaze sharpened, not angry. Something older, rougher. Not here. A contraction cut across her spine before she could answer, stronger than in the woods, and she arched with a choked sound. Marta cursed and shoved a rolled cloth between her teeth. Don't fight the wave. Through it. Through it. Cordelia grabbed for anything solid, found a wrist, Sebastian's, and clamped down. The world detonated. Heat flashed from the point of contact up both their arms like lightning turned liquid, white gold and searing but not painful. Her wolf, quiet and half-starved since exile, surged awake with a wild cry inside her ribs. Scent flooded the room until it felt too small to contain it. Cedar bark split open in winter, clean steel, snow at dawn, crushed purple heather under a boot heel. Her pulse kicked to a new rhythm that was not only hers. Sebastian made a sound she had never heard from a man that size. A sharp, stunned inhale as if he'd been struck through the chest. Marta looked up sharply, nose flaring. Marta looked up sharply, nose flaring once, and went utterly still. Oh, she said very softly, then louder. I'll be outside if no one is actively dying. She left without waiting for permission. Cordelia could not release his wrist. It wasn't force. It was gravity. The bond pulled like a tide. No, she whispered, because the alternative was too impossible. No, I don't. Sebastian dropped to one knee beside the table as if his legs gave out under him. Not submission. Reverence so sudden it looked like pain. He stared at where her hand held him, then at her face, and the word tore out of him rough and raw. Mine. It should have terrified her. It did. A little. Every chain in her life had started with a possessive. But this did not feel like a collar closing. Come with war tied to my throat. His jaw come with war tied to my throat. His jaw flexed. I know what mark they burned into you. You should send me out before dawn. Her voice broke. 3 provinces would thank you. My wolf would gut me if I did. Some hysterical, unbelieving part of her wanted to laugh again. Instead, her fingers tightened and another strange thing happened. The crushing pain in her abdomen eased, not gone, but blunted, when his free hand settled over hers on the curve of her belly. Their heartbeats, 2 frantic drums a moment before, began to align. 1-2, 1-2, steadier. Cordelia closed her eyes because looking at him while this happened felt too intimate, too exposing. Shame rose hot in her throat with old lessons. Don't depend, don't need, don't trust hands that can become fists. Yet beneath it was relief so fierce it made her chest ache. Someone was looking at her like truth instead of scandal. Like she was real. Say something, she whispered, not sure if she meant to him or to fate. Sebastian's thumb brushed the back of her hand once, careful, asking and not taking. You do not owe me acceptance tonight, he said. You owe your body rest. You owe your child breath. The rest can hate us in daylight. Us. The word landed and stayed. Outside, through thick stone, bells rang from the lower gate. 1, 2, 3 hard strikes. Formal arrival, formal demand, politics at the door. Sebastian's gaze cut toward the sound and hardened to iron. Then he looked back at her, and the iron changed shape. Not softened exactly, but focused. They'll want audience, he said. They can wait. No one enters this room without your consent. Not elder, not envoy, not blood. No one had asked her consent in days, maybe years. She swallowed. Even you? A flicker, almost a smile, gone quickly. Especially me. His hand remained on hers until her breathing slowed, and when sleep dragged her under at last, she went down to the rhythm of matched heartbeats and the impossible certainty that if she woke screaming, he would still be there. By dawn, Frosthold smelled of boiling bones and wet wool. Snow had stopped. Wind scraped the shutters like claws. Cordelia woke in the same room, though the war maps had been cleared from the nearest wall and a proper bed dragged in from somewhere less strategic. Her dress had been replaced with a plain shift. Her brand was salved and bandaged with clean linen. A screen had been set so she could have privacy when she wanted it and line of sight to the door when she didn't. Small details, deliberate details. She pushed up on one elbow and nearly reached for a weapon before remembering she had none. A voice from the hearth said, "There's broth. No sedative." I made Marta swear. Sebastian sat in a chair that had no business being comfortable, long legs braced, a stack of sealed parchments untouched on the table beside him. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. Stubble shadowed his jaw. His coat hung open, sword still on. You stayed, she said, before she could stop herself. You woke every hour to check the door. He tipped his chin toward the bowl. I figured if you saw the same guard each time, you'd stop trying to stand on a sprained ankle. Heat touched her face, equal parts embarrassment and anger at being read so easily. I don't remember trying to stand. You failed quietly. Against reason, a corner of her mouth twitched. It vanished when her gaze snagged on the sealed parchments. 3, tied with different ribbons. Alliance contracts? He followed her look and did not lie. Demands, dressed as courtesies. Surrender of one branded exile as proof of good faith. His voice stayed level by force. They arrived before sunrise. Cordelia's fingers dug into blanket. Then send me. No. You haven't even opened them. I don't need details to reject extortion. She stared. Men like him were supposed to weigh lives like grain. One woman against 3 borders. One unborn child against harvest roots. Why? His eyes met hers, gold rim bright in morning light. Because you are not a parcel. Because if I hand you over once, every oath this hall is trying to rebuild turns to ash. A beat. And because my wolf would tear through my own skin before letting it happen. Too much. Too fast. She looked away first, throat tightening around words she didn't trust. You could take advantage of this bond, she said quietly. Most alphas would. Lock me, claim me, parade me as legitimacy. He leaned forward, forearms on thighs, making himself smaller instead of looming. Then hear me plain, Cordelia Valewood. You will not be claimed by urgency. If you choose to leave when you can travel, I will put escort on you and supplies in your cart. If you choose to stay, it will be because you decide, not because I pressed. Silence stretched. Fire popped. She took the broth with both hands so he wouldn't see them shake. Days settled in jagged pieces after that. Not peace. Not yet. But a pattern she could stand inside. He moved her from the war room to chambers 2 doors away from his own, then seemed to think better of distance and converted the old map nursery on the east side himself, because she admitted once, too tired to mask it, that sudden corridor noises made her flinch and silence made her panic worse after the trial. The nursery had belonged to no one for years, windows boarded, one crib frame broken and shoved against a wall. She expected servants. Instead, she found Sebastian there at dusk, shirt sleeves rolled, scarred warrior hands sanding splinters from crib rails as if rough wood were an enemy worth personal attention. "You have captains for this," she said from the doorway. "I have captains for border raids." He blew sawdust from the grain and checked it with his thumb. "This one's mine." Something in her chest shifted. At night, when sleep dodged her and every creak sounded like boots coming to drag her out again, he sat across from her with ledgers open and read numbers in that steady, unadorned voice. Grain stores, winter loss projections, widow allotments, timber requisitions. Not poetry, transparency, boring, grounding truth. "Why these?" she asked on the third night, wrapped in blankets while snow traced the glass. "Because secrets made room for your frame-up." He slid a column toward her. "Tell me if this ration split is wrong." She blinked. "You're asking me?" "You ran Valewood's Yarrow stores through 2 blights," he said without looking up. "I'd be a fool not to." No one had called her useful in weeks, maybe months. She bent over the figures. Widowed households burn more lamp oil, increase tallow, or they'll trade away protein. He changed the line without debate. In the corridor the next afternoon, a contraction hit so abruptly she folded to her knees, palms on cold stone, breath gone. Panic followed on its heels. Too early, too soon, not here. Sebastian was beside her before the second wave crested. He didn't bark orders, didn't scoop her up and run. He knelt, one hand braced at her back, the other held out where she could choose it. "Look at me," he said. She did, because his voice gave her something fixed. "Breathe in for 4 with me, out for 6. I'll count." He counted each wave, low and relentless, until pain loosened enough for thought. By the time she could stand, shaking and sweaty, her nails had crescented his palm. He glanced at the marks and looked almost satisfied. "False labor again," she muttered, humiliated. "Practice," he corrected. "Your body's learning." No pity, no scold, just fact. For the first time since Mooncourt, she felt cared for without feeling owned. The feast was Guinevere's idea, though it wore Sebastian's seal. "Diplomatic reassurance," his steward called it while servants laid silver and blue runners in the rebuilt Great Hall. The neighboring houses need to see Frosthold's stable. Cordelia nearly refused to attend. Her brand still ached under fresh skin. Half the court still watched her as if a confession might fall from her mouth if they stared long enough. But Sebastian asked, not ordered, asked, whether she wanted a place set beside him or behind a screen. She chose beside. If they were going to judge, let them do it to her face. By first bell, the hall glittered with visiting nobles in fur and jewels, their scents layered over roast venison and mulled wine. Laughter rang too bright. Eyes tracked her constantly. Guinevere Frostborn swept in late, winter rose silk, and a smile like polished glass. Cousin, Cordelia remembered, highborn, raised for influence. She embraced Sebastian with cheek-kiss familiarity and gave Cordelia a curtsy shallow enough to be insult by geometry. "How brave," Guinevere said, loud enough for 3 tables to hear. "To host complicated guests during alliance season." Sebastian's hand stilled on his cup. "Choose clearer words, cousin." Guinevere's smile widened. "Of course. I only mean the realm is tender where succession is concerned. People talk when an unclaimed womb appears in an alpha's private wing." The table rustled with awkward amusement. A lord down the line, House Caro, ruddy and overfed, snorted into his drink. "Aye, bargaining chips should at least have known fathers." Wine sloshed. Then a lady in pearl sleeves accidentally turned too fast and poured half her goblet across Cordelia's lap. "Oh heavens," the woman breathed, not sorry at all. "My hand slipped." Cordelia rose so quickly her chair scraped stone. Heat climbed her throat. Shame followed, old and vicious. She could already hear Valewood's court in these voices: whore, liar, vessel. Sebastian stood. The room went quiet the way forests do when predators step from brush. He did not shout. He did not slam the table. He let his wolf rise just enough that his canines lengthened, eyes flooding gold, voice dropping into steel edged with frost. "Guest law is amended now," he said, each word carrying to the rafters. "Any insult to Cordelia Valewood is an insult to the Alpha's bloodline. Punishment, immediate expulsion and forfeiture of winter trade rights with Frosthold." Caro barked a laugh, incredulous. "For a branded exile? You can't be serious." Sebastian turned his head a fraction. "Captain." 2 guards appeared from the wall as if summoned by thought. "Escort Lord Caro out," Sebastian said. "No cloak, no boots. Let him consider seriousness in the snow." Caro lurched to his feet, sputtering protest. "You'd cripple an ally over one female?" "Over law in my hall." The guards took him by the elbows. He struggled once. Sebastian didn't even watch him go. He was already looking at the pearl-sleeved lady, who had gone paper white. "You spilled on my table," he said to her. "You will apologize, or leave with him." Her lips trembled. My Alpha House will object." "Then they can object from outside my gates." "I apologize," she whispered, eyes fixed on the floor. Sebastian nodded once. "Accepted." He signaled a servant, took the fresh plate himself before the boy could carry it, and set it before Cordelia in full view of everyone. New napkin, new cup, steady hands. "Eat," he said, just for her now. Not hidden protection in private chambers, not whispered assurances at midnight. Public, costly defense with witnesses from every border. Cordelia sat slowly, pulse pounding. Around them, the hall resumed in careful fragments, conversation strangled into politeness. No one met her eyes long now except with caution. Under the table, her fingers had curled into fists. She forced them open and realized she was shaking for a different reason than fear. Sebastian returned to his seat but did not release the edge of her chair until he felt her settle. "Too much?" he asked under the noise. She looked at him, the alpha who had just rewritten law on a breath and spent political capital like kindling because someone humiliated her, and found no smugness there, no expectation of gratitude as payment. "Enough," she said, voice unsteady. It was enough. His shoulders eased by a degree. Across the table, Guinevere watched with a smile that did not touch her eyes, one elegant finger tracing the stem of her goblet as if calculating new angles. Cordelia saw it and understood, finally, that protection would not end this. It would provoke the next strike. Still, when Sebastian's hand rested open on the table between them, palm up and waiting, she stared at it only a breath before laying her own over his. Not surrender. A beginning. Not surrender. A beginning. Guinevere raised her goblet. To Guinevere raised her goblet. "To Frosthold's adaptability," she said, smile bright as ice. Crystal chimed. Nobles echoed the toast with uneven enthusiasm. Cordelia lifted water instead of wine and held Guinevere's gaze while she drank. The cousin's expression did not crack, but something predatory moved underneath it. Calculation. Rerouted. By second course, the first folded parchment arrived at Sebastian's elbow, carried by a page trying not to shake. Blue wax. Unfamiliar crest. Sebastian read, jaw tightening. Before he could fold it away, a second came. Green ribbon. Then a third. Black seal stamped with the mountain crown of House Dreslin. They were not new demands in substance. Those had come at dawn and been refused, but revised instruments from the same signatories, recopied with sharper terms and faster clocks. Guinevere watched each delivery with polite surprise. "Busy evening, cousin," she murmured. Sebastian did not answer her. He broke all three in silence while venison cooled. Cordelia watched his eyes track line after line, watched the muscle in his cheek jump once. He set the parchments down with deliberate care, as if not to tear them by accident. "Read them," he said quietly, turning the pages toward her beneath cover of the centerpiece boughs. She scanned. Alliance 1. Reaffirmed military support in exchange for internal stability safeguards. Alliance 2. Winter grain convoys guaranteed if Frosthold affirmed succession clarity. Alliance 3 dropped all pretense. The woman called Cordelia Valewood shall be repudiated publicly and transferred into neutral noble guardianship until inquiry concludes. Any issue of her body to be kept ward under signatory protection to preserve regional confidence. Issue of her body. Child reduced to legal livestock in 7 words. A chill moved through her despite the hearth heat. She looked up at him. They coordinated. "Hours apart, 3 houses, same language," he said. "Yes." Guinevere set down her fork with a soft click. "They worry for you," she said. "After what happened to your line, no one wants uncertainty." "You drafted this," Cordelia said before she could stop herself. The table stilled. Guinevere turned to her with widened eyes so practiced it almost deserved applause. "My dear, I broke her peace. If your condition complicates treaty law, that is regrettable, not personal." Sebastian's voice went flat. "You will not call my mate a condition." The word hit the air like a struck bell. Half the hall inhaled. Guinevere did not blink, but color drained a shade from her face before she recovered. "Then formalize it," she said lightly, "or release her. Ambiguity kills packs faster than hunger." She rose, smoothing rose silk over her hips. "Think on it before dawn, cousin. The signatories won't wait forever." When she moved away, the nobles around her opened space instinctively, satellites yielding to a larger gravity. Cordelia watched her go and understood the shape of the threat at last. Guinevere didn't need claws. She had signatures, bloodlines, and 3 provinces willing to call cruelty governance if it came in elegant script. The next morning, Frosthold woke to rumor before breakfast. By noon, servants pretended not to stare at Cordelia's belly as she crossed the east corridor. By dusk, 2 visiting ladies had urgent headaches and canceled tea when they learned she'd be present. Someone left a dead crow on the nursery windowsill with a strip of blue ribbon tied to its neck. Marta tossed it into the kitchen fire without ceremony. "Cowards use symbols when they're too weak for direct speech," she muttered. Cordelia sat on the edge of the rebuilt crib frame, palms flat on sanded wood. "They're not weak if they can starve a fortress by spring." "No," Marta allowed, "but they're still cowards." Pressure came from all sides, each piece plausible on its own. A trade steward accidentally delayed lamp oil delivery to her wing. A clerk misplaced the requisition for infant linens 3 times. An elder asked in public whether Frosthold intended to set a precedent for accepting fertile infiltrators. Sebastian answered each slight like he had at the feast. Direct, costly, impossible to misread, but defending her publicly lit new fires every day. Cordelia could feel the burn radius widening. On the third day after the feast, she found him in the strategy chamber with Captain Ivar and two quartermasters, maps spread beneath weighted daggers. She paused in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt, and heard Ivar say, "If House Dreslin closes the East Pass, we lose Salt by first thaw." "And if we surrender her?" Sebastian asked. Ivar's mouth tightened. "We keep routes. Lose ourselves." Sebastian nodded once. "Then it isn't a choice." The words landed in her chest heavy and sharp. Later, under Sebastian's standing consent order, the scarred guard on her corridor knocked first and asked whether Lady Guinevere might enter under watch. Cordelia, wanting the conversation where witnesses stood one door away, said yes. She arrived with sugared pears and a shawl of absurd softness, every inch concerned cousinliness. "I thought we should speak woman to woman," she said, while attendants withdrew and the guard remained stationed just beyond the half-closed door. Cordelia didn't touch the tray. "You don't know me well enough for that." Guinevere smiled gently. "I know enough. You're frightened. You should be. Men make noble promises in warm rooms and practical decisions in council." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "There is a merciful path. Accept temporary guardianship for the child under my house's protection. Recover in the northern convent. In a year, if inquiries clear you, perhaps supervised visits could be arranged." Cordelia stared at her. "You want my baby?" "I want continuity," Guinevere corrected. "Frosthold needs an heir untouched by scandal." "Untouched by me, you mean?" Guinevere's gaze flicked to the bandage at Cordelia's collarbone. "Branded women don't get to redefine reputation, they survive by compliance." There it was, steel under silk. Cordelia rose slowly, one hand at her lower back. "Leave." Guinevere inclined her head as if indulging a child. At the door she paused. "When the vote comes, he'll have to choose kingdom over appetite." Her legs shook, then sat hard and pressed her legs shook, then sat hard and pressed both hands over the child as if she could physically shield them from contracts and cousins and smiling predators. That evening she told Sebastian everything, word for word. He listened without interruption, shoulders going rigid in increments. When she finished, he walked to the hearth, braced both hands on the stone, and stared into flames long enough she thought he might crack it. "I can exile her today," he said finally, "for threatening you." "And hand her a martyr's crown?" Cordelia shook her head. "She wants that. She wants to claim you're ruled by instinct." He turned back, eyes bright gold at the edges. "I am ruled by instinct where you're concerned." "Then use your mind to protect us both." Something like pride flickered across his face, fierce and brief. "Gods, you're dangerous." "So is she." Outside, the wind rose. Somewhere in the lower courtyard, a courier horn sounded once, then again. Another letter. Night brought snow and that old inability to sleep. Cordelia left her bed before midnight and found the nursery lit by one low lamp. Sebastian was there, seated cross-legged on the rug amid ledgers and a pile of tiny carved blocks someone had donated from storage. His coat was off, his shirt sleeves were rolled, sawdust still clung to his forearm where an old scar ridged white across muscle. He looked up as she entered. "Couldn't breathe in your room either?" She nodded. He patted the rug beside him. Not command, invitation. She sat with a grunt, pregnancy making grace theoretical. The child shifted, then settled when Sebastian's scent wrapped around her. He passed her a ledger automatically. "Read?" he asked. "Please." He read figures until her pulse slowed. Grain barrels, cured meat counts, lamp oil measures, widow allotments revised after her tallow note. Then, without warning, his voice roughened. "I was in this room when Frosthold fell," he said, eyes on the page, though he wasn't seeing it now. "Not this exact furniture, same stones, I signed 3 dispatches and sent half my guard south because I trusted an ally's warning that proved false. He swallowed once. By dusk, my mother was dead in the West Tower, and my brother bled out on these steps. Cordelia stayed still, barely breathing. I rebuilt walls, he continued, trained boys too young to hold shields, counted every nail like prayer, told myself if I made no sentimental decisions, no one could use my heart against my pack again. A humorless huff. Then you arrived in the snow, and my wolf chose before my politics could speak. She set the ledger aside. Do you regret it? He met her eyes directly. No. I fear the cost. I do not regret the truth. The simplicity of it undid something in her. I keep waiting, she whispered, for this to become another court. Another room where men decide what happens to me while calling it law. Her fingers twisted in her shift hem. At Valewood, the worst part wasn't pain. It was watching faces I loved choose convenience over me. I don't know how to survive that twice. Sebastian's hand opened between them, palm up in the lamplight, same as at the feast. Then don't survive it alone. She put her hand in his. The bond hummed alive, warm current under skin. Not wildfire this time. Deep river. He lifted her knuckles and pressed his forehead to them, eyes closed. Reverent again, but steadier than that first shock in the war room. She reached with her free hand and touched the back of his neck, feeling tension braided there like rope. May I? He asked, gaze dropping to the brand at her collar. Yes. His fingertips were careful as he loosened the edge of bandage to check healing, touch feather light over damaged skin. No flinch, her body realized with surprise. No fear at all, in this moment. He looked up, close enough that cedar and frost heather filled her lungs. I want to kiss you, he said, voice low. Only if you want it too. Yes, she breathed again. The kiss was brief and unbearably gentle, mouth to mouth, a promise rather than a claim. Heat unfurled through her, not the panic heat of labor, but something steadier, almost grief-bright. She had forgotten tenderness could exist without debt. When he drew back, his forehead rested against hers. No more rooms where you're outnumbered, he murmured. She almost believed him. A hard knock shattered the quiet. Both of them turned. Ivar's voice came through the door, clipped with urgency. My Alpha. Scribes from the lower archive request immediate witness. They've found correspondence in the North Post satchel, sealed with Valewood Crescent and addressed to Rogue Command. Sebastian's body went still beside her. Cordelia felt the blood leave her face. How old? Sebastian called. Stamped this week. Impossible. She hadn't touched a seal in months, but Impossible had branded her once already. Sebastian rose in one fluid movement and offered her his hand up. You stay here. No. Cordelia. If there are letters with my seal, I see them now. Not after they've grown teeth in 10 mouths. He stared at her for one taut second, then nodded. With me, then. They walked the corridor together, fast. Halfway to the archive stairs, pain seized Cordelia low and vicious, sharper than any practice wave. She caught the wall with a gasp. Sebastian was at her side instantly. Contraction? She nodded, unable to answer. He counted her breathing under his breath, hand braced at her spine, until it passed. Too soon for this intensity. Too hard. When they reached the lower archive, 3 scribes stood around a table as if around a corpse. On the wood lay 5 folded letters, each stamped in red wax with a Valewood crescent. Cordelia reached before anyone could stop her and snapped one open. Her own name appeared in the signature line, Cordelia Valewood, above promises of patrol schedules, gate rotations, weak points in Frosthold's repairs. Payment requested in silver and future safe passage. A scribe cleared his throat. These were recovered from a detained rider near the North Cairn. He claims he was to deliver to rogue bands by dawn. Claims, Sebastian repeated, dangerous calm. Another contraction slammed Cordelia so hard her knees buckled. She gripped table edge, vision tunneling. Wet warmth spilled suddenly down her thighs. Marta, who had apparently been summoned for the first gasp of distress like a storm called by barometer, cursed vividly behind her. That is not false labor. The room erupted in motion. Sebastian caught Cordelia before she hit stone. How far apart? Too close already, Marta snapped, hands at Cordelia's belly. She's early and stressed. Move. Before they could take 2 steps, the outer bell began ringing, rapid, formal, relentless. Council summons, emergency session. A runner skidded into the archive doorway, breathless. My Alpha, the hall is filling. Elders demand immediate judgment on treason evidence before first light. Envoys from all 3 alliance houses are present. Of course they were. Guinevere had timed it to the heartbeat. Cordelia clutched Sebastian's sleeve through another brutal wave and saw, over the runner's shoulder, Guinevere at the far end of the corridor, framed in torchlight, rose silk immaculate, watching, waiting. Sebastian looked from the blood on Cordelia's legs to the forged letters on the table to the cousin smiling down the hall, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw true helpless fury in his face. The bells did not stop ringing. The bells did not stop ringing. Birthing chamber. Now. Marta's tone could have cut oak. Sebastian shifted Cordelia higher in his arms, already turning for the stair when a second runner barreled into the archive, skidding on stone and dropping to one knee. Council has invoked iron claws, he gasped. No Alpha may delay judgment on active treason evidence during Alliance session. Envoys are invoking breach penalties if hearing is postponed. Marta swore again, more creatively. They can invoke my fist. She's in labor. Guinevere's voice floated down the corridor, clear and sweet as poisoned tea. Then let us be swift for everyone's sake. She walked toward them, flanked by 2 council elders and House Dreslin's envoy, all solemn faces and winter furs. She didn't glance at the blood on Cordelia's shift first. She looked at the letters on the table and then at Sebastian. Cousin, she said, you can still preserve Frosthold's standing. Convene judgment, transfer the accused into neutral custody, and let the child be delivered under proper noble supervision. Cordelia felt Sebastian's arms tighten, a growl rising in his chest that vibrated through her ribs. Marta planted herself in front of them like a blunt weapon. Take one more step and I'll prove healers know anatomy from both directions. Guinevere lifted a brow. Threats in front of envoys? How rustic. Another contraction hit, brutal and deep, and Cordelia bowed with a cry she couldn't swallow. Warmth flooded again between her thighs. Not practice, not maybe. Now. Sebastian bent his head to hers. Say the word and I lock the hall. Damn the claws. And there it was. The same impossible choice in a different shape. Hide and let Guinevere script treason in her absence, or stand in open court while her body split itself in half. Cordelia dragged in a breath through pain and tasted iron. If I don't go, she whispered, they convict me in silence. You're bleeding. I know. His eyes flashed wolf gold. Cordelia, put me down. Marta stared at her like she'd lost her mind. You cannot mean. I mean no one gets to decide my fate while I lie behind a locked door. Cordelia gripped Sebastian's collar with shaking fingers until he looked only at her. Help me walk. For one suspended heartbeat he fought her with his gaze alone. Then he set her on her feet, one arm iron around her waist. Fine, he said to the room, voice like winter breaking. We convene in the Great Hall, on my terms. Any man who speaks over her speaks against me. Guinevere smiled, small and victorious, and stepped aside. As you wish. The Great Hall was packed before they reached it. Elders in carved seats, envoys in foreign colors, Captains along the walls, servants pretending to polish what was already clean just to stay and watch. Snowmelt dripped from cloaks onto stone. The 3 alliance contracts lay displayed on a side table as if prepared for signing, their seals unbroken and patient. Cordelia entered between Sebastian and Marta, each step a controlled fall. Blood tracked faintly behind her on the flagstones. Murmurs rose, then died when Sebastian's gaze swept the room. At the center dais, Elder Tovin struck his staff once. Emergency Moon Court of Frosthold convened. Evidence submitted. 5 letters bearing Valewood seal, alleging espionage by Cordelia Valewood. Judgment required before first light under iron clause and treaty witness. Dreslin's envoy folded gloved hands. Our houses expect lawful action. My house expects oxygen, Marta muttered, but low. Tovin looked to Cordelia with brittle formality. Accused. Do you deny authorship? A contraction clenched, harder than the last. Cordelia closed her eyes, wrote it, forced her voice out on the back of pain. I deny it. Guinevere rose gracefully from the witness row. With respect, denial is predictable. The seal is clear. The writer confessed delivery instructions. Sebastian spoke before Tovin could respond. And under whose authority was that writer seized? Guinevere spread her hands. Mine, as acting liaison while you were occupied. Convenient, he said. Tovin lifted his staff again. Order. We evaluate evidence, not insinuation. Cordelia's laugh came raw. Then evaluate it. She let go of Sebastian's arm and stepped forward alone. The hall seemed to tilt. Is not tampering, Cordelia shot back. Is not tampering, Cordelia shot back. It's reading. She cracked the wax in full view, hands shaking, and flattened the parchment against wood. Ink crawled across the page in someone else's imitation of her script. She pointed at the seal impression. See this crescent? It opens right. She looked straight at Tovin. House Valewood's hereditary seal has a flaw from a cracked mold 43 years old. The crescent opens left. Every true family press carries it. Ask any archivist. A scribe near the pillar blinked. That is correct, Elder. Whispers burst like sparks. Guinevere's voice sharpened. Minor artisan variation proves nothing. Then let's prove more. Cordelia held out her hand. Master Scribe Halden. Bring your ink ledger. An old man in ink-stained cuffs startled as if slapped. My lady? Now. He hurried forward with a bound register. Cordelia flipped pages with clumsy fingers until another contraction buckled her over the table. Sebastian started forward. She held up a hand without looking at him. Count, she hissed. He did, instantly, low at her shoulder. In for 4. Out for 6. Good. Again. When the wave passed, she stabbed a line in the ledger. 3 letters claimed to be written during my stay in East Wing quarantine. That week, Frosthold used Iron Gall batch C7 after the storm spoiled stores. These forgeries use soot ink cut with lavender oil. Expensive, court blend. Who in this hall uses lavender in wartime correspondence? Eyes turned, one by one, toward Guinevere. Her maid, pale in the 3rd row, looked abruptly ill. Guinevere's chin lifted. Scented ink is not a crime. No, Cordelia said, breathing hard. Forgery is. Marta moved up beside the dais, voice carrying. I have testimony. 2 nights ago, I saw Lady Guinevere's maid leaving the lower archive with a wrapped object shaped like a seal press. She told me it was a candlestick. Candlesticks don't stain wax red through cloth. The maid made a tiny choking sound. Guinevere rounded on her. Silence. Too late. Guard, Sebastian said softly. 2 wolves peeled from the wall and seized the maid before she could run. The hall erupted in shouts, envoys protesting, elders demanding order, chairs scraping. Through it all, Cordelia braced both hands on the table as another contraction ripped through her hips and down her spine like a hooked blade. Tovin slammed his staff. Quiet! Sebastian stepped to the brazier at the foot of the dais and lifted the 3 alliance contracts one by one. Blue ribbon, green ribbon, black seal. Dreslin's envoy surged up. You cannot void pending accords during active hearing. I can refuse extortion in my hall. Sebastian held the first contract over flame. Fire caught, raced gold along parchment. He dropped it in. It wasn't a choice. The second followed, crackling. She is my truth. The third curled black and vanished into embers. Gasps cracked across the chamber like ice. Guinevere went still, then very calm, which was worse than fury. You just burned 3 alliances. No, Sebastian said, turning back to her through heat shimmer. I burned your leverage. She moved then, too fast for silk and court posture, hand flashing to her sleeve where silver winked. Down! Ivar roared. Guinevere lunged at Cordelia with a hidden silver blade aimed for her exposed throat. Sebastian caught her wrist mid-strike with a snarl that shook rafters, claws half shifting through skin as he twisted. Bone popped. The knife wobbled, but didn't fall. Guinevere screamed and kicked, driving her knee toward Cordelia's abdomen. Cordelia pivoted on instinct, pain and training and rage aligning for one clean motion. She slammed her elbow hard into Guinevere's ribs. Air exploded out of the other woman in a strangled grunt. The blade flew, skidding across stone and ringing against the brazier base. Guards piled in, chaining Guinevere's arms behind her as she spat and writhed, hair coming loose from jeweled pins. You carrion bitch! Guinevere hissed at Cordelia through blood on her lip. You were discarded for a reason. You'll always be a liar men pity until they tire. Cordelia stood shaking, one hand on the table, one on her belly, blood and sweat cooling under her shift. She stepped forward anyway, close enough Guinevere could see she did not flinch. I was discarded once, she said, breath ragged. I am not disposable now. Silence fell, thick, absolute. Sebastian climbed the dais and faced the court, voice carrying without a shout. Guinevere Frostborn, by witness of this hall, you forged seal and script to fabricate treason, attempted coercive seizure of an unborn heir, and made armed assault during Moon Court. Sentence is immediate. Title stripped. Land seized by Frosthold. You will be exiled to the northern convent under blood oath silence for life. Break oath, and the oath kills you. Guinevere bared her teeth. You burned a kingdom for her. Sebastian did not blink. No, I burned your leverage. He nodded to Ivar. Take her. As the guards dragged Guinevere toward the doors, she twisted once, searching the room for allies. She found only lowered eyes and turned shoulders. Tovin cleared his throat, voice unsteady. And the forged letters? Sebastian pointed to Halden. Archive every page, seal record, ink analysis, and witness statement in open ledger. Copy to each allied house by dawn. Treason cannot be buried where all can read it. Halden bowed so low his nose nearly hit the parchment. Another contraction seized Cordelia, this one so violent her knees gave, and she cried out. Marta caught her under one arm, Sebastian the other. That, Marta snapped at the entire court, is your final evidence that she has done enough for one night. Move. No one blocked them. Labor swallowed hours into flashes, torchlight on stone, hot water steam, Marta's commands, Sebastian's hand in hers, his counted breathing when she couldn't find her own. At some point dawn paled the shutters. At some point Cordelia bit down on a leather strap and screamed his name, then cursed him, then laughed hysterically when he said, "Good lungs." And Marta told him to shut up or be used as a traction post. When the final push came, it felt like being split by lightning and earth at once. Then suddenly, release. A thin, outraged wail sliced the room. Cordelia collapsed back, sobbing without sound. Marta lifted a squirming, red-faced infant slick with birth and triumph. "Daughter," she announced, grinning through sweat. "Strong set of lungs. Stronger mother." Sebastian made a broken sound Cordelia had never heard from him, somewhere between laugh and prayer. He cut the cord with hands that shook and looked at the child as if seeing fire for the first time. Cordelia held out trembling arms. The baby was warm and impossibly light and real against her chest, tiny fist opening and closing by her collarbone. "Hello, little moon," she whispered. "You stayed." Sebastian bent over both of them, forehead to Cordelia's, one hand cupping the back of their daughter's head. "Mine," he breathed, and then, correcting himself with fierce tenderness, "Yours, ours, mate." Exhaustion dragged Cordelia under with her child tucked to her skin, and Sebastian's scent wrapped around them both like a wall that breathed. 2 nights later, under a full moon silvering Frosthold's rebuilt courtyard, the moonwell glowed like a bowl of stars poured into stone. Only their closest stood witness. Marta, with her arms crossed and eyes suspiciously wet. Ivar in formal leathers pretending he wasn't smiling, Halden clutching a fresh oath scroll, 2 elder wolves sworn neutral. Their daughter slept in a fur-lined cradle beside the well, tiny chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Cordelia's legs still trembled from childbirth. Sebastian looked equally wrecked, stubble, dark circles, a fresh scratch on his jaw from infant nails. He had never looked more beautiful to her. They faced each other in the moonlight. Sebastian's voice was low, roughened by sleepless nights and too much feeling. "Cordelia Valewood, before witness and well, do you consent to the mating mark?" She swallowed, pulse thudding at her throat. "I do." "Do you consent to mine?" His mouth tipped, reverent and a little wild. "Gods, yes." He reached up and unfastened his collar, bearing the strong line of his throat first. Vulnerable, offered. No dominance. Trust. Cordelia touched the exposed skin with 2 fingers, feeling his racing pulse jump against them. "Thank you," she whispered. He stepped closer until their breaths mingled cedar and heather. "May I?" he asked again, eyes on the curve where her neck met shoulder, where scent pooled warm. "Yes." He braced one hand at her waist, the other cradling her jaw, and lowered his mouth to her shoulder curve. The first press of teeth was sharp warning, then the bite. Clean, deep, bright pain that flashed white behind her eyes. Cordelia gasped, fingers digging into his back. Pain transformed almost instantly, heat flooding from the mark through her chest and down her spine, through old fear, through scar tissue and grief, burning and soothing at once. The bond surged open full force. She felt him, his steadiness, his protective fury, his quiet places he showed no one, the grief for mother and brother, the relentless tenderness he hid behind command. Home, sudden and electric, settling under her skin. Sebastian shuddered against her, a groan torn from him, and when he lifted his head his eyes were molten gold and wet at the edges. "Mine," he whispered, voice breaking. Cordelia slid her hands up his jaw, drew him down to equal height, and bared her own teeth at the mating mark point above his collar. "Yours," she answered. "Now hold still, Alpha." A ragged laugh escaped him right before she bit. His body jerked hard, his knees nearly buckled. She held firm, not cruel, not timid. Blood and salt touched her tongue, then that same fire flooded back through the bond, doubled now. His strength pouring into her exhaustion, her resilience threading into his old fractures. Wolves aligned, no hierarchy, no leash. Partnered. "We're shaking." "Mate," they said at the "we're shaking." "Mate," they said at the same time, half laughing, half crying. Moonwell light pulsed once, as if answering. Behind them, Marta sniffed loudly. If either of you faints, I am not catching two alphas tonight. Ivar coughed into his fist to hide a grin. Sebastian pulled Cordelia into his arms carefully around healing bruises, and she went, all the way, no reservation left. Their scents braided in the cold air, marks throbbing in matching rhythm. Their daughter stirred in the cradle, made a tiny noise, and settled as if the new bond's calm reached her too. Forehead to forehead, lips brushing, they whispered the vow together. No more choosing survival over us. Never again, he said. Never, she answered. They stayed there long after witnesses respectfully looked away, simply breathing each other in while the mark heat settled from wildfire to steady hearth glow. The next council session was held with every door open. No velvet screens, no closed quorum. Frosthold wolves packed the gallery shoulder to shoulder with traders, widows, apprentices, and visiting delegates who had come expecting scandal and found procedure. Halden stood at the central lectern and read aloud the complete record of Guinevere's crimes. Forged seals, ink discrepancies, maid testimony, attempted assault, sentence carried out at dawn. At the rear of the hall, a messenger from the northern convent displayed the blood oath writ bearing Guinevere's thumbprint and oath scar. Sebastian then laid out new treaty terms on plain oak boards visible to all. Mutual defense clauses untethered from marriage, grain accords based on audited quotas, not heirs, rotating open councils with recorded votes. My house will require review. Review. My house will require review. Review publicly, Sebastian replied, or trade elsewhere. No one laughed this time. At his nod, Cordelia stepped forward in formal lunar blue, mark visible at her shoulder, their daughter sleeping in a sling against her chest. Murmurs rippled, then quieted when she spoke. By decree ratified today, Frosthold establishes the office of Keeper of Oaths. Her voice carried clean. All seals, contracts, exile warrants, and court judgments will be audited through this office before enforcement. No sentence by forged evidence. No secret tribunals. Every accused has right to inspection and witness. Tovin, chastened and pale, rose to place the carved oath chain across her palms. Cordelia Frostborn, he said carefully, do you accept charge as High Luna and Keeper of Oaths? She looked at Sebastian once. He nodded, pride unhidden. I accept, she said. Applause started near the back, one widow, then another, then a roll of fists on benches until the hall shook with it. When it faded, a final delegation was announced. Valewood. Alpha Rowan entered without fanfare, snow on his shoulders, Branique at his side, and Cordelia's younger brother 1 pace behind them. The gallery bristled. Rowan stopped 3 steps from the dais and did not meet Cordelia's eyes at first. Evidence reached our border this morning, he said. Seal flaw, ink match, confession copy. We retract charges against Cordelia Valewood in full under Moon Law. Brannick bowed stiffly as if the movement hurt. Exile record amended. It was not an apology. It was law dragged where pride refused to walk. Cordelia's brother finally looked up. Regret sat plain on his face. I should have spoken that night, he said, voice rough. I was a coward. She held his gaze a long moment. The old wound ached. It did not own her anymore. You warned me at the gate, she said. It kept me alive. Keep that courage next time before the brand, not after. He nodded, swallowing hard. Rowan cleared his throat. You may return to Valewood with full name and dowry restored. Cordelia touched the sleeping baby's back through the sling and felt the solid heat of Sebastian at her side. She thought of judgment stones and spit and iron. She thought of Moonwell vows. No, she said simply. My home is here. Rowan inclined his head once, accepting what he could not command, and led his party out. Before the session adjourned, Cordelia added one final motion to the ledger. Frosthold schools and guard training are now open to displaced and abandoned daughters from all border packs. No lineage fee. Applications begin at first thaw. Marta muttered, "About time," and signed as witness. At sunset, wind swept clean across Frosthold's rebuilt battlements. Sebastian stood at the parapet with their daughter tucked against his chest in a sling that made him look both terrifying and absurdly gentle. Cordelia came up beside him wrapped in a dark cloak, shoulder mark warm under wool, oath chain cool in her hands. Below them, the courtyard bustled. Apprentices hauling grain ledgers to the new records room. Two girls from a dissolved hill pack sparring with wooden staves under Ivar's barked corrections. Halden pinning fresh treaty copies on the public board where anyone could read them. Sebastian shifted the baby carefully and offered Cordelia his free hand. She took it. "Hi, Luna," he said solemnly. "Alpha King," she replied, equally solemn. Their daughter sneezed. They both laughed. From the lower gate, a cart rattled in carrying 3 frightened young women and 1 defiant child clutching a broken doll. The first of the abandoned daughters promised asylum. Marta was already there, hands on hips, directing them toward warm kitchens like a general moving troops. Cordelia watched until the smallest girl looked up and saw her on the wall. The child lifted a hesitant hand. Cordelia lifted hers back. The girl smiled. Sebastian leaned his temple against Cordelia's, the baby between their heartbeats. Beyond the walls, snowfields glowed blue under rising moon. Behind them, hammers rang where the last scaffolds came down. Not rebuilding from nothing now, building on truth.